wonderful to have dinner at this table in my studio. This is the table where I work, I write here, I draw, I prepare exhibitions on the back wall, and so it is my living and inspirational space, and I'm surrounded by many beautiful sculptures and objects. Particularly in this barrel-vaulted space on either end are two Zanzibari doors, which were collected in 1949 by the famous modernist architect Norman Eaton. And on his death in a car accident in 1966, they were left to Alexis Preller. And Preller built them at the end of his life into a very beautiful arched Arabic structure called a mudif. And he died before they were installed, which was really tragic. And I searched for them for many years before acquiring them, but I had heard of them from my uncle, Lionel Bennett, Uncle Pix, when I was a boy of 11, when Eaton died in '66. And so they sat here in my mind, and they were almost mythical. So it's extraordinary to live in this space and to have built this space in memory of both Eaton and Preller, and in some ways to feel this continuing legacy of their creative spirit being handed down from one generation to another. My Uncle Lionel Pix was the man who had confidence in me, and even at the age of 11 he always took my work to him to look at, and he was the first person to buy my work. So with the monies that I acquired, the money that he gave to me, I acquired the Ming knife from 225 BC. So that was my first collecting piece, which over many years was this process of art being transformed into art again. And so the pieces that I have had, or do I have in my home, have never really felt like they are of any monetary value. They are sacred objects, and I feel as though I'm custodian of them. And so it has been a very special relationship. Lionel knew Preller, Eaton, and Walter Battis. And Walter Battis eventually agreed to have a look at my work as a schoolboy in Standard 9 and Standard 10, looked at my portfolio. And it was a remarkable moment for me to engage this man who I had greatly admired. He had been inspired by Pirniev to look at the rock art in this country, and you will see in the painting, which is here in my studio, the calligraphic, small, sort of autographic marks of swarms of people around three pools, and they have an extraordinary kind of humor. And Battis had a sense of understanding fantasy and, in a sense, the political, which for me was particularly interesting. Preller, on the other hand, was quite remote. I never met him other than once very briefly at his retrospective. And I have a painting which normally hangs at the end of my bed, a very beautiful deep green skull called You Will Never Know, a mysterious painting, and it is one of the few paintings that I hang in my home, and it at present is on loan for the Preller retrospective at the Norval Foundation. So I miss it in my bedroom. In terms of the moments with Battis, and as my career evolved, I studied at Wits, and I have mentioned before these remarkable lecturers who taught me particularly history of art. people like Michael Godby and Rory DePel. Mike Godby taught me around the work of Piero della Francesca, these incredibly pristine spiritual spaces and images. And in my practical work, I had Robert Hodgins, the painter, and particularly Niels Coetzee, who is another person who had confidence in me. He taught me sculpture, and he really instilled in me a work ethic and a way of looking at the world and engaging with three-dimensional form in particular. So I majored in sculpture at Wits University and then went on to study at St. Martin's School of Art. And on completion of my studies at St. Martin's, Alan Crump, who became the youngest professor ever appointed at Wits University, a very innovative man who studied in Los Angeles, worked with Richard Serra as his assistant for a period, and Vito Conci. And he came back, became a professor, and I got a telegram saying, if you want a job, come home. So I'd been studying in London, I was in America, and I did come home, and I started my early teaching career at Wits. And Alan had confidence in me as a teacher, as an artist, and eventually also as a curator. So it's remarkable when one does have people like this in one's life that really do empower one. They kind of push one to the edge and to parameters, but that's how we all learn. And so it is this constant move forward that I learned from them, and hopefully I imparted to my students over 37 years at the university skills that I'd learned from Alan, from Niels, and from many of the wonderful colleagues who I taught with Paul Stopforth and Peter Schutz, Walter Altman, Penny Siopis, and Colin Richards. And so it was an amazing group of artists who were on the staff, which made a real contribution to the art of that period. My exhibiting career moved largely from South Africa offshore to London, Los Angeles, and New York, where most of my career has played its way out, and with the odd, not odd, I mean a number of major shows at Johannesburg Art Gallery, two very big ones at the Standard Bank Art Gallery, and I now have this survey exhibition coming up at Wits Art Museum, which opens this year in May, and that I'm preparing a publication for. It is a long time since I last showed in Johannesburg, and I'm back here at the University Art Gallery, where I worked as a student, and I was part of the acquisitions committee for many years, and to show in Johannesburg at the university is like a homecoming for me. And of course it gives me time to ruminate on my own workings as an artist. The exhibition is a survey exhibition based on 3 works in the gallery collection. It's a bit of a dotted line in the sense that it doesn't cover my whole career, but it gives some sense of the span. And it it is also a great privilege to be working with Fiona Rankin-Smith. This is her last exhibition that she will be curating before she retires. And it's been such a pleasure to be able to work with her as a colleague who's also been deeply interested in curation. So the exhibition starts with my early work, which focuses on the mind's eye, on mental abstraction, trying to map as accurately as possible what I saw with my eyes closed. And most people say that you don't see much with your eyes closed, but we do when we sleep. We spoke about this in my studio. We do see many things, and there are also neurological processes, like one sees with a migraine, of very strong graphic qualities that come through the eyes and the neural processes. So the early drawings focus on that. And there's one in particular, the Firedries, where one sees this huge mental landscape where everything vibrates. Every line has a frequency. And so it is looking deeply into the internal world and into this sense of the connectedness of everything. The other drawing also on the exhibition, which is so important in my process of working, which focuses on the external world and the internal world and the balance between them. And that is a work called The Eyes Within. And it has these large white circles which are like wide-eyed, looking deeply inwards. And so it is straining to look inwards, to be the cartographer of that internal world. But after I had done the Firedries and a very large work for the Saint-Duplessis Theatre, I felt that I'd swum too far out and that I needed to refocus on the physical world, the optical world. And so the next series that we see in the exhibition are a group of still lives, what I call quiet lives, which are very large drawings of objects in my studio, sacred objects, and they are narratives. They're called quiet lives because it is this quiet process of solitude in working and working intimately with these objects. So the drawings are large and you feel as though you are close in the sense of observation of the objects. The works continue into the beginning of me traveling on the east coast of Africa, which has always interested me. So in the Comores, in Zanzibar, Lamu, Pemba, with the East African trade into Southeast Asia. So travel has become a very large part of my practice over many years. I did spend time in Micronesia and Polynesia and out to Easter Island, visiting some of the last of the celestial navigators and seeing really, or trying to understand how our species moved out of Africa to China and Japan and then into the Pacific. And those celestial navigators understood the waters of the oceans, their canoes, and of course how the stars enabled them to navigate their way across these huge distances. So the celestial has been extremely important for me, and a huge change in my life happened when I had an exhibition in New York called The Status of Dust, in which one of the first astronomical works which I did on the island of Réunion, on the rim of the active volcano Piton de la Fournaise, was shown there. And Zara Turgel, who I got to know well in time, introduced me to her to-be husband, Nick Scoville, one of the world's great astronomers who taught at Caltech. And she arranged for Nick and myself to meet in Pasadena and Los Angeles. And we had a wonderful morning speaking to each other around astronomy and art. He was very particularly interested in sculpture, and talking about background radiation. And Zara persuaded him to have an artist on a project that he was working on, this ambitious project to map 2 square degrees of the universe. And that's what we see behind us here. So Nick called me most probably about 3 months later and said, would I be the resident artist on the project? And so it was the beginning of a lifelong journey with the astronomers. Initially, the idea was the project would last for about 4 years, and it went on to 8 years, and I'm just about to leave for the University of Tokyo to join the team in our 20th year in looking at this 2 square degree field. So the introduction to Nick really extended my perception. The exhibition here is called Close and Far, and we've spoken about the closeness in terms of looking internally, starting to look at the external world, my world around me, traveling, but the exponential differentiation once one started to look out towards the center of the universe was extraordinary. And it's been remarkable to work with this team of astronomers. At our first meeting in New York so many years ago, Jehan Kartalper was a doctoral student at the time, and she today heads up the project. And so it's been amazing to see a younger generation move through the project and keep this process of deep investigation. So Nick and Jehan, and then Henry McCracken, I met for the first time in New York at the conference, at the gathering, and we have always been very interested in looking at art together. He is at the Center for Astrophysics in Paris, and so whatever city we are in the world, and we've traversed from New York, Paris, Hawaii, Russia, Finland, Japan, we do go and look at art, and particularly the first exhibition we saw in New York was a Brancusi retrospective, and we're about to meet in Paris again to see the great Brancusi retrospective there. So it has been this link between me learning about deep space and complexities of that, and at the same time sharing this artistic practice. And it is this extraordinary dialogue between art and science that I think for our species has allowed us to engage our deep sense of inquiry, which I think is fundamental to my life and my work.